Welcome, everybody. I'm Santiago Neeland, and this is The Divine Within, the invisible connection with God. Today, we have a very interesting topic, and we're going to be discussing the sins of humanity. I have a very important guest. She is Diane Kurtz-Calabrese. She has written a very interesting book. From her many collections of books, but this one is called He is Watching. It is a powerful book that looks at today's moral crisis through a Christian perspective. Drawing on interviews with leaders from 7 denominations, she asks readers important questions if we are living in the end times and are we spiritually ready for the moment that we're going through. So it's really provocative and deeply reflective. This book really encourages readers to awaken and examine their faith. So welcome, Diane. It's a pleasure having you here in The Divine Within.
Thank you for having me.
Well, and before we dive into our first segment, which is really interesting, can you give us a little bit of your background on why you wrote this book and what really drove you to writing these types of books on I really love what you did and going through all the different denominations and doing all this research. You really present a very scientific and very practical way of addressing these times. So can you give us a little bit of your background on why and how you did
Sure,
this?
sure. I was a recreational therapist for 30 years, so I'm recently retired from the Veterans Administration Medical Center. And I was a recreational therapist there on the PTSD unit and also palliative care. So when I retired from there, I decided, well, I think I want to write a book. So I put a lot of content into like holistic healing. So my first 2 books were on that, but I'm also a Roman Catholic, so I wanted to incorporate my next books more Christian-based. So that's how I came up with He is Watching. And then I have 2 other books that are more children's genre, but the He is Watching focuses on sins of humanity. But I first start out with like faith versus belief, just to kind of distinguished, the two between, because faith it involves a lot more. So when I go through writing the content, I just wanted to maybe bring awareness because of my background working as a therapist in mental health. People aren't always aware of what's happening around them, and the different kinds of things that go on in the world that are not so good. So I just wanted to kind of slowly gear into that one chapter after another, getting into different sins of humanity and how that leads to abuse and eventually the second coming of Christ. So,
According to you and your research, not only from your background, from your Catholic background, but how can you define sin from this Catholic or Christian perspective?
well, I go into, I spend a lot of time talking about like physical abuse, emotional abuse, and sexual abuse, and how that stems from mental health, and working in the with the background that I did. But you also find it just in the workplace, not only in the family environment, but also in the workplace. So I talk about that because it lays so heavily on even minute sins to how it could go to extremes. So for example, greed is one way, like just how we raise our children, to be respectful. And then I give cite examples in the chapter, just how with raising, say, a child per se, and giving them too much, that it can lead to something else later on, and it could get worse and worse, and it could escalate. So I give kind of a lot of examples in there, but I also give examples like in the workforce too, just how sometimes we tend to always want the next thing, the next promotion, the next raise, or and how are we going about doing that? Do we really care about our coworkers, and what kind of world are we living in today? So I do a lot of examples both from family and the workplace. But I mean, things are pretty bad today. Like if you take human sex trafficking, so it's so extreme. Like an example would be the Epstein case, which is such a big profile right now. So, and of course, that's been in the news, and a lot of people have been talking about that. So, what are we doing on a smaller scale so it doesn't escalate to that? So, like just paying attention to those, different things. So, I bring a lot of that into the book.
And I like that you're giving us, I mean, the different types of sins, and we're going to be bringing this throughout our conversation. But let's dive into our first segment, which I think sets the tone of our conversation, and it's what we're going to talk about first is going to be UFOs and fallen angels. So
Hmm.
in this segment, or in this part, Diane is going to look into UFOs from a biblical perspective, connecting recent government reports with ancient scripture using the Book of Enoch, interviews with religious leaders, and personal accounts. She questions whether we can call aliens what we can, or what we call aliens might be simply spiritual, older spiritual beings. So, based on your research, what can you conclude from this? Is it the same, the angels and the UFOs, or what could be the differences?
Well, there's really no proof behind it, but like I interviewed 7 different ministers across denominations, particularly an exorcist, and they were all very credentialed in different areas of different denominations of Christian faith. So I asked for their opinion to bring in the biblical scripture and compare it to, what are they seeing in the skies? Is there a relation? And a lot of them did think that there was. Some weren't sure because there's no absolute proof. But I did do some research on my own. And I don't know if you saw the segment with Tucker Carlson. He interviewed Gary Nolan, who's a scientist from Stanford University, and he was asked to, he talked about this on his podcast, to kind of distinguish between, what's going on. The scientists came in and they had a lot of data from people in the military that were either abducted or had seen UFOs. And in his testing, he did say that, they did get some psychic ability. There was some supernatural experiences that they did have. He did testify that they are real. He didn't know where they came from. They could be from outer space and under the water. But when you compare that to scripture, a lot of ministers did believe that they were the fallen angels or the giants, the Nephilim from a different time. So, in the book, I do a compare and contrast. So I'll tell you what the clergy had to say, then I'll give you the research, and then I kind of throw out some questions. So, what do you think? So, I kind of get the audience thinking, like, what do you think? Does it make sense? Is there a connection? So,
And I like this part because I don't think there's any culture, any civilization in the world that does not mention of these giants, these beings that were before what we know about history, and that really takes our time span, or and what what really we consider the time that human beings have been here really expands that time. So it's interesting that all the civilizations and all the accounts, and myth and legend everywhere, we find these. And now that you're mentioning this about UFOs and fallen angels, are they related? I think a lot also has to do with the rebellion in heaven, with whatever happened, the war in heaven and all these fallen
yeah,
angels. There was, I mean, everywhere we see this break in the continuum, in, like, let's say, the evolution. And I'm going to throw this in, and maybe this is the first time you hear this concept. But we in the Urantia book, that there's a concept called the Supreme God, the Supreme, which is like the evolutionary attribute of God. We're all contributing, and like this is the universe is evolving to that. And what they say, and they state, is that this Lucifer rebellion was a break in this continuum, and that's what set us off into such a dark time. Well, that such a
yeah.
dark maybe evolution, to where we got this to this point, and we see this darkness all around us. That's
It does
something
it does
that I
seem it
find it.
yeah. Yeah, it does seem like things are getting worse, and it does feel like we're doing a full circle, going back to prehistoric times. So and people will have their opinions, and they're either going to agree with certain things or they're not. So I mean, time will only tell, but a lot of the things make sense. I know, I don't know if you ever watched the History Channel, but they do have archaeological excavations, and they have found like the skeletons of giants, of superhumans. So it's coming about. So it's just when you put two and two together, it just kind of makes sense. So, I
There's a
mean, still
smoking
people
gun. You can
believe
find it
it. So,
everywhere,
yeah.
right?
So, yeah. So that's why I give the questions at the end. But I'm always, within my faith, I'm always interested to hear what the clergy have to say. And I always want to reference to the Bible. Does this fit?
Okay.
Does this make sense? So I go into a little bit of that, and I don't go too deep into it. I let them know what's out there, and I ask the clergy. That was more of a discussion with the clergy. But you could refer to the books of Enoch and and reference it yourself and sort of make a decision. My whole theme was I want to get to the second coming. Is this all leading to the second coming? All these different signs. So, and
Yeah,
that's
and
what
that's
each chapter leads to.
yeah, yeah, and I think it's a buildup, and let me just throw this in there because a lot of what I work with is I call it the human matrix pattern and the law of time, and it's based on Mayan mathematics, and it's not really the religion or the cosmology, but rather the timekeeping that they had. So they created a lot of maps, and they have this map. Well, different maps, but one of them in particular kind of maps, the personal evolution and the patterns within a personal evolution and the evolution as a whole. And it tells us that when these situations, and we're referencing the war in heaven, when Satan and Lucifer rebelled, and everything went astray. They see that we get to a point, that gets to an evolution, and within the normal time, we're at a point. Well, in many cultures, in many ways, they call it the eschaton, and the eschaton, references it, which is the ends of times, and you can see it in all the different cultures, where you get to this point where you kind of make a leap or a change in the current era into a new era. So
Hmm.
and in what it says is that, I mean, that the universe was continuing in that, but even though we were in this rebellion and we kind of defaulted, or the planet was not going into let's say the regular evolution, we still have to go through that, and that's just really what's breaking in the cracks, and what's really, the when the sun rises or the sun shines the brightest, is when you can see the shadows of the most, so this is kind of what they're
Yeah.
saying, that we're in this huge contrast. I don't know what's your opinion on that.
Well, like I said, I think time will tell, but I think if you're listening to the news and you're listening to, I don't know if you follow the story of the mystics, what's happening with
Can you tell us about
Garabandal.
it?
There was back in back in 1962, and I have this in the book too. It's about future events, but in 1962 to 65,
Okay.
there was apparitions of the Blessed Mother with four children, Conchita
Yes,
Gonzalez,
yes,
and this
yes.
happened in Garabandal. And she keeps talking about the warning. Now, this was in 1962, but if you notice, there's a lot of podcasts about that now. And she says the warning will be very soon. So now, when she had that warning, she was a child, and they talked about it even as she got into her teens, and it sort of went quiet for a while, but she's about the age of 75, and she says it's going to be very soon now. So I think in her lifetime. Okay, so I think that's what she meant by it. She does know the date of the miracle, and the miracle is supposed to be a year after the warning. um so the warning would be within that year, and it would be at the time when things are the worst. And now they had the movie last year.
Mm-hmm.
um I have the feeling, it's just a lot sooner than people are really prepared for. I definitely think it's going to be in our lifetime. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, yeah, and one
I
of the
can't say
things
we
that
can't say the day or the hour, but I mean, the warnings are coming heavy now. They're coming
yeah.
heavy.
On the Divine Within podcast, we'll share real conversations to help you find a personal connection with God. My goal is to support your faith, growth, and journey toward discovering the divine within yourself. Join us to deepen your faith and spiritual journey.